the EU has lots of money, and it wants to invest it in lots of different things, according to EU policies. And it invests the funding through different instruments. There are different channels for the funding. And I'm sure that most of you are aware of all of the different instruments and the programs. Basically, there are three key areas of funding for civil society. Well, it's certainly important that there are these resources made available. I think we would all agree that we need the resources. Why it's important that you all have an understanding of the background to these funds is what you've been talking about, really. The key point is that you need to have the big picture. You need to have a clear understanding of the big picture so that you can help to explain that big picture to others. If we have a good understanding of this big picture, as organizations we can be more strategic in how we link our strategic plans with these resources, or not link them, as the case may be. But at least you need to be able to have choice and be able to match the priorities of your organizations with the priorities of the EU policies. Secondly, there's another good reason for being very clear on the differences of these fundings, is that they are all delivered through different mechanisms. So there's lots of administration which is linked to these different funding channels, and they're all slightly different. So if you want to get some of the funding, you have to understand how to get it. What are the mechanisms? The general rules of how the funding is spent are universal. They do not change between the programs. But the mechanisms for delivery does change. It's not all delivered through call for proposals. It's not all grant projects. There are lots of other mechanisms, and we have to have an understanding of what they are. We also have an understanding of who may be eligible for the different funds and eligible to do what with them. So there's all these issues to do with administration, which changes between the programs. So for all of us, and you as a group are a little bit unusual. If we were all sitting somewhere in Africa and you were from African countries, we wouldn't be having this discussion, because you would only basically have one source of funding from the EU. If we were all from EU member states, we wouldn't be having this discussion, because we would get all our resources from basically one funding source from the EU. But you are lucky, because you can access funds from three different areas. Firstly, we have the instrument for pre-accession, which is available to all of you, to some of you more than others in terms of different types of funding within Eeper. But the instrument for pre-accession is something special to this region. But then there are two other areas. There are thematic programs under different instruments, such as the instrument for democracy and human rights, which you are able to access, but of course it's also, other countries can as well. But these are thematic programs which are run differently to Eeper. And then thirdly, we have the community programs, which again, to more or less a degree, you in your countries can also access some of the funding through the community programs as your countries buy into those programs. But the community programs also are managed in a different way to the other two areas. So you need to have a clear understanding of each of these three areas of funding. This instrument is packaged up into 5 components. So the funding is delivered through these 5 areas of Eeper. For the formally recognized candidate countries, all of the package is available. But for the other countries, you're restricted to component 1 and component 2. And these are the 5 packages. So you have one which is all around institution building, one that supports cross-border activities, and those two are open to all of you. And then we have these other parts of Eeper. One is on regional development, one is on human resource development, and the last one is on rural development. And we will look at these in a bit more detail. The purpose of Eeper is something special which differentiates it from the other programs, the other funding sources, and that is that Eeper is specially designed to support those countries who want to join the EU. And this is a very special characteristic. This makes it very different to all the other funding sources. So the idea is that Eeper is to support countries who want to join the Union and to get them ready to join the Union. And it's not only to get the public sector, and governments ready to join, but everybody. So it includes civil society, and civil society has a role in that preparation. And not only is it generally getting ready to join the Union, but it is ensuring that all of the structures are in place. And again, this is a very particular aspect of Eeper. What it means is that when a country accedes to the Union, it has to have all of the administrative structure in place to manage EU money. For most of your countries, it is still managed through Brussels, or the delegation in the country. But as you move closer to membership, you'll go through a decentralization process. So the candidate countries, so Turkey and Croatia, and increasingly Macedonia, is having a decentralized system. And this is where the EU begins to hand over control of the funding to those countries, to the governments, basically. And the governments must establish the right kinds of structures to manage the money. And those structures will mirror the structures which are existing in member states. So this is a very important process, and each country will take different lengths of time to be able to get there, to get the structures in place, have the capacities to manage the money. But this, actually, amongst you, this creates quite a big difference in terms of Eeper funding, because those of you from Turkey and Croatia and from Macedonia, you will be going through a decentralized system of management of the funding. But for the other countries, you're still under centralized management, which basically it's through Brussels. And there are administrative differences related to those things. But this process is all to help the countries to get ready. But I say it's not just about the government having the right structures in place. It's also important that civil society organizations internally also have capacities for managing EU money. So the last point on this slide here about having structures in place for controlling funds and auditing, this is not just the public sector. The EU would like to see that mirrored in civil society organizations. We know that many NGOs struggle in terms of financial management and being transparent with what they do with funding and reporting to their constituents on money. So going through the terrible nightmare of managing EU money is actually a good thing in terms of increasing capacity in organizations to be more transparent with their finances and to show what they do with their money and be accountable for it. So it's part of a process which will help the capacity building with NGOs. But I do actually want to say something about Eeper component 3, 4 and 5, which is not yet available to all of you, but hopefully it will be later. Why this is important is that these are actually the components of Eeper which really get countries ready to join the Union. Because these funds are all about putting the investment at the local level. So regional development, rural development and human resource development is all about trying to get large amounts of EU money directly to the target groups. And very often the mechanism for that is civil society organizations. These parts of Eeper, what we have up here, Eeper 3, regional development, and 4 and 5, very much match or mirror the funding available to member states. You mentioned cohesion funds. So there are a number of funds available to the member states. There are social funds, there are cohesion and structural funds. And within the member states, this money is used at a local level. So it is absorbed through local authorities, through NGOs. It is not through central government. So in order to build up the capacity in candidate countries and potential candidate countries, those people like you must understand that all this money is going to come. and you should be part of that process of building capacity to absorb and to direct the investments. In Turkey and Croatia at the moment, increasingly there's a lot of money going through NGOs in these three Eeper components. These are indicative figures, but these are the figures which are expected to be dispersed up until this year. And we'll actually look at some of the programming processes later this morning. You'll understand that the money which is indicatively assigned to one particular year will not be spent in that year, but it is the financing memorandum signed between your country and the EC, then spending that money in the next 3 years ahead. So at the moment we're mainly beginning to spend money which was programmed in 2008. So for example, this technical assistance program I think must be a 2008 program. I will have to ask one of the, is it 2008? So this column I think says 2008. So this is the money which was programmed in 2008 which is now being spent. Projects being delivered with that, and the next couple of years we will see all this other money coming, and we'll know that as we go through the years the amount of money increases. But as we get closer to membership of the EU, we'll see that money under Eeper 1 and Eeper 2 actually goes down, because Eeper 1 particularly is about capacity building. So it is expected that as the investment takes shape, as it has an impact, you have capacity, so you need less investment. So the amount of money available under Eeper 1 will begin to go down as the years go by, but the amount of funding on the other components will actually go up. So when you look at the figures for your countries to see that they're going up, mainly this is because the money will be channeled towards the other components of Eeper. Well, certainly under 3, 4 and 5 there can be projects where part of that project is to build capacity. So if you have a program in rural development to do extension work with farmers, or to get more credit lines to farmers for example, there might then be some technical assistance project which helps to build capacity with farmer groups so that they can manage things. So every project under Eeper 3, 4 and 5 can easily have a capacity building element. The EU has 7 different instruments for delivering money. Eeper is one of them, and the most important one for you. There are other mechanisms which are used to deliver development assistance outside of the EU, and this is mainly through this one, DCI. So for example, most of the EU money that goes into Africa or Asia is through DCI. Closer to us is this instrument, the neighbourhood instrument, which is to help build up. It's related to the cohesion policies. It's about getting good relationships between neighbouring countries and ensuring there are not inequalities around the borders of the EU. And it's also there to promote exchanges and trade and business. So the neighbourhood instrument has, for example, grant schemes which many of you would be eligible for. Your organisations could work in partnership with other organisations which are targeted through this instrument. This instrument here, the democracy and human rights one, I guess that most of you know about this instrument and probably have benefited from the funding. So this is a long-term instrument. It's been going for a long time, and I think it's expected to continue for quite a while as well.